Hey everybody, Ray here, and today I want to showcase my hybrid build with Charge and Upheaval for the Barbarian leveling. I think right now Barbarian is one of the best characters to level with at the start. It is pretty much fast, it is really strong and can take out almost all kind of content right here. It's also really fun to play. What could be more fun than just running around with a huge hammer and hitting enemies in the head? I have used that build to level up to 100 in one day and have finished as number 18 Barbarian on the leaderboard. Let's go and look what kind of stuff I can recommend for you to just level faster. So about our main abilities, most of the time we are using Upheaval, since it's a main skill of the build. And we are using it together with Charge, which got buffed this season, and just an amazing ability for both crowd control and dealing damage. We're also using Rallying Cry because it's amazing for additional movement speed just to run around faster, and for leveling you will need to run around faster pretty often. This combination pretty much opens a lot of opportunities. We can just move up enemies with Charge, then stack our Fury with Lunging Strike, and then just hit it with Upheaval. After that, we can easily use our Rallying Cry and run to the next pack. That's pretty much how the build currently plays. That way we can always be on the move, always will be fast and efficient. Let's go and look further into what kind of abilities and skills we're using after that. Alright, so talking about our three, it's pretty simple. We're just getting Lunging Strike because it's an amazing ability that moves us forward. We're using Lunging Strike mostly to just short gaps and to move forward in the situations when we need it. So I think it's still one of the best generators in the game and probably the best basic for the whole Barbarian build. Then we are taking the Upheaval because Upheaval pretty much does a lot of damage and I think it helps with AoE really heavily. We are also taking Enhanced Upheaval together with Furious Upheaval because it works pretty much good to stack up the damage. That way we can just stack a few bonuses, especially against bosses. The Violent Upheaval is pretty much an option too, but we just have Berserkering almost all the time anyway. As a passive, we are taking pressure points just to make sure that we are making enemies vulnerable, at least with the Upheaval itself. Moving forward, we are taking Rallying Cry and we are going to use Rallying Cry all the time. Because Rallying Cry gives us a lot of movement speed. It works really good, we just need to cry and run forward, cry and ride forward. We are also generating Fury through the Rallying Cry, however, in the higher levels, if you will need at least a little help with survivability, you can swap to Strategic Rallying Cry. Overall, I still recommend Tactical, because that way you will always have much more Fury. As the passives, we are taking Impotent Presence and Martial Vigor, because both of them are good for survivability. Moving forward, I'm taking the Warcry, because I think Warcry helps a lot. To kill like a pretty tough rare or to kill a boss or something like that. I think it's a good bonus. We're also getting 45 from the Warcry and we are getting Berserkering for 4 seconds every time we are Warcrying. I think it works really good in most cases. Booming Voice works pretty good too, so we are taking it to just run faster when we are using our Rallying Cry. We are pretty much obviously just using 5 points into Charge, because Charge right now doing a crazy amount of damage, and with 5 points we're just maximizing our chances to one-shot kinda squishy enemies with 1 charge. As a passive, we're using Power Charge, because that way we can lower the cooldown. It works really good in terms of working and lowering the cooldown itself. So I think Power Charge is pretty much mandatory if you want to spam Charge pretty often. If you don't really like Warcry, you can take Leap instead, because Leap is a pretty good ability to move fast and shorten the gaps. However, I think we pretty much have the Lunging Strike for it and it's not that important. I'm taking aggressive resistance right here to survive better, to get all this battle fervor, and that way we'll have Berserkering pretty often, especially right after we are using charge. Moving forward, I'm taking 3 points to the Pit Fighter, because it gives both damage and survivability, which is amazingly good, and Slaying Strike, because that way we're just doing more damage to injured enemies. It mostly helps against bosses, but I think overall it's worked pretty good too. I'm using Thick Skin, just 1 point to get at least some 45 when enemies are attacking me. You can invest more in there, but it's not that important. Last but not the least, we are using Wrath of the Berserker. That's a pretty good ability, which will give us a lot of bonuses. It will help us to have Berserk all time up, and it will give us a lot of additional bonuses, mostly to our damage. That way it should work pretty good. Also, we will have increased movement speed from the Berserker and can run around faster. I'm taking 2 points to well up just to make sure our damage to single target is higher, and 1 point to concussion because since we are using the hammer mostly, it works pretty good to sometimes just stun enemies. And key passive, we are taking Unconstrained because Unconstrained is completely amazing. It will give us more duration of Berserkering and will increase the damage bonus to 100%. It's the most important stuff in all of it. Since we have a really good uptime of Berserkering itself, the damage increase from Unconstrained is the most important part. It will give you almost the same bonus as Unbridled Rage can give, but with Berserkering bonus from Unconstrained, we can pretty much have more damage from charge as well, because charge is not core ability, so charge can benefit from Unbridled Rage. That's why I think Unconstrained right now is one of the best options for the hybrid builds. So, talking about the aspects, we just need a few for build to work. The most important one, in my opinion, is the aspect of the Ancestral Charge. It will pretty much just summon 4 more Ancients, and all of them will charge, hitting for about 30% of normal damage. It works pretty good. Right now, I think it's one of the best options, and it will make your charge hit harder. We're also using aspect of Berserk Reaping, just to make sure that we're applying bleeding damage. Since we're Berserkering pretty often, and we're dealing direct damage pretty often as well, we will constantly apply bleeding damage. I think it's working pretty good, and it will add just a cherry on top for your damage overall. Another really good aspect would be aspect of Relentless Berserkering, just because it will give us chance to have more Berserkering timings, especially when they're using core skill and they're using Upheaval pretty often as well. You can also get a few nice uniques, which I can recommend for leveling if they will drop for you. It's not mandatory, but if you will get them, well, it will work pretty well. One of them is Hellheimer, which will give you additional bonuses against burning enemies and will just make ground around your upheaval zone pretty much burn, which is pretty cool bonus. And another one would be Ring of Red Furor. It's a pretty good bonus that will give us a chance to have a guaranteed critical strike with our upheaval after we are spending 100 fury within 3 seconds. It also happens pretty often as well and could be a pretty good bonus. Talking about items itself, well, it's pretty easy as well. We can just focus on a few main stats. At such items as armor, I usually prioritize like maximum life, damage reduction, and stuff like that. When it comes for stuff like gloves, you just need attack speed and critical strike chance together with rank for your main skill. And for the weapons, you just need to look for higher damage. So just try to get as much item power as possible and get as much damage as possible. Doesn't matter if you have like uniques or rare weapons. So most of the time you're just getting different bonuses right here. I usually recommend just to pick any kind of weapon and use it even if it will be completely yellow without any bonuses on top. If you have some good important aspects that you want to use, you can just slap it on your jewelry, for example, like on rings or on your gloves as an option, because you don't really need to change them that often. At your boots, you will need to stack the movement speed and resistances as possible. It's a pretty good place to get like maximum evade charges, movement speed bonus as high as possible, together with some resistances, and that's pretty much it. Just make sure that you have a movement speed bonus because you need to run faster to level faster. You can also roll movement speed on your amulet since it's a pretty good place for it as well. Another tip for weapons would be keeping your aspects on weapons you are not really using. For most of my skills I use my Hellhammer or my axe right here. Since I'm not really using like one-handed axes and one-handed swords, I just keep my really important aspects on axes and swords. It's a pretty good place too, since I'm not really using them to attack. Anyway, their item power is not really connected with what we are hitting with. Since we are hitting with a hammer and with axe, I will be able to change them later when the time will arrive. But right now you just don't really need it and you can focus on the main weapons that you are currently using. So talking about our weapon expertise. Generally I recommend to use two-handed axe expertise because it works so good for different types of damage. That way we always dealing damage to vulnerable enemies because we are making enemies vulnerable when we are hitting them with our core skills. It works pretty good that way. As a second option, if you don't have an aspect, you can try two-handed sword expertise to just make enemies bleeding. However, if you already have an aspect for bleeding, you can just go with two-handed axe because it's a really decent option right here. Talking about our Paragon, it's pretty basic as well. Inside the Paragon, most of the time we just need to get sources for Overpower. That way both our Upheaval and our Charge will be able to Overpower. That way, first we are taking Might right here for physical damage, armor and some stat bonuses. It will also give us 8% damage bonus while wielding two-handed weapons, and since we are going to use Hammer for most of our attacks, I think it's a really good bonus. I'm taking both Tennessee here together with Brawn for physical damage and additional life. It helps with survivability a lot. First board is going to be Barbarian. Right now, I think Barbarian is a pretty good board, we just don't really need a lot of bonuses around here. So we are going to the left and picking Territorial. With Territorial we are receiving less damage from closed enemies, which is an amazingly good, and we are dealing more damage to close enemies. Most of the time we are really close to the enemy when we are hitting them with Upheaval or Charge, so it's a pretty good bonus. We also can get some resistances, which will boost our survivability really good. We can take like 1.5% here, 1.5 here and 1.5 here, together with 6% prone condition. You can also go up and get Hunger and Fury to get some Fury on kill, but I don't really think it's mandatory until you'll be much closer to 100. Going to the left, our next board is pretty much Carnage. Carnage is a really good bonus, but we're not really needed at lower levels. First we need to go for Enraged, then we need to go for Glyph, and go for Exit up top. The Glyph here is Crusher. Since we are going to use like Mace and Hammer itself for most of our abilities, it's a pretty alright bonus, especially because of the other power additional damage. It works really good. We're just taking Esther all around and taking Brush together with Spheres for damage while Berserkering bonus and damage reduction from close enemies. We don't really need Carnage, so leave it for later and just exit through the top. The next board is pretty much Bone Breaker. So every 20 seconds our next skill is guaranteed to Overpower. That's a pretty strong bonus and we will need to get there as fast as possible. So just when we have the board, we're just going right here, taking Baljoner and going to the right. Then taking Bone Breaker as well. Right after that, you can just go to the left and take the slot itself. The slot will contain you Ire to get more damage while Berserkering. Since we are Berserkering like 90% of the time when we are fighting, it's a pretty good bonus. It will also boost our ability too, because we will receive less damage from elites, which is pretty much important. We're also taking Brutality here and Vigor. If we will be able to meet the stats requirements, it will be nice, but if not, don't worry about it, it's a leveling build, so it will be alright. Right after it, we are exiting through the right, and the next board is Decimator. With Decimator, we just need to go fast to the Decimator itself. It's a pretty good bonus, because that way we can just overpower vulnerable enemy and get additional damage bonus, and when we just hit an vulnerable enemy, we are getting additional damage bonus as well. 5 seconds, that's a lot, so we will have that bonus up 90% of the time. Right here after that, we can take the Dominate as a glyph here. It will give us a lot of overpower damage and should work really good in combination with our different source of overpowering, which is mostly aspects. And don't forget about it, Bone Breaker, so we are overpowering pretty often with it. So then we're just picking all possible willpower around, taking Demolish, taking Arrogance. After that we can go back to the last board and take Carnage. So just going right here, taking Carnage, together with Berserker, and at the last points that we will have from like level 95 and higher, we can go for Hunger and Fury, because I really think it works pretty good at the end game. After that our leveling build is complete, and it should be 100% alright to run it from 95 to 100. I'm not really going to change anything big in here, because it carried me over without any issue. So talking about Seneschal Construct and what we can use for it. Since it's a leveling build, we don't have an access to most of abilities. I generally just use two that we just received from our seasonal journey. Right here I have used Lightning Bolt because it's basic, it's dealing some damage and pretty much works alright, together with Jurati that I received from seasonal journey package. I think it's a pretty nice one because it's just dealing some kind of AoE damage and it should stack pretty well. As a supports I just use like Mockery, that way our Seneschal can pretty much taunt enemies, which I think is pretty good. I'm using some kind of burning damage on it because I have like a burning support, and critical strike chance because I think it's pretty nice against bosses. At the Lightning Bolt I use Fortify support to just get at least a little Fortify, together with Safeguard for damage reduction, just 3%, so it's not really that important, and Arching support because Lightning Bolt can pretty much arch. That's it, you can just use any kind of supports that you will drop, and any kind of abilities as well. If you will get taunt, it can pretty much help, but that's it, and you don't really need anything more than that. So talking about general tips in terms of leveling. I would say that Nightmare Dungeons is probably the best way currently to level from 50 to 100 still. And if you're choosing the Nightmare Dungeons, you can just go for ones that just have a little more density and a little more experience from like closed spaces. A lot of dungeons like Blight Burrows, for example, or Gore Ruins are working really good with the Barbarian. I also really like Outdoors Cave because it can be really good for the general leveling as well. There's like a lot of monsters and they are giving you a lot of experience per hour. So overall, just focus on the best dungeons, run as fast as you can, and you're definitely going to make it. So that was my hybrid Barbarian build with Upheaval and Charge. I think Barbarian right now is a really perfect position, and it would be really nice to see what kind of builds we'll be able to develop later this season. Thank you very much for watching, please subscribe for more RPG content and see you next time.